Welcome to The Most Mindset, where you'll hear real conversations about mindset, mortgages, and mastery for loan officers and originators who have outgrown being undervalued and underpaid. Here's your host, Michael Most.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Most Mindset. I am joined today by my sister from another mister, as we joke, because she calls me her brother from another mother. Everyone meet Alexandra Kerr. Thank you so much for coming today.
It's such a pleasure. Any opportunity that I can take to engage and speak with you and share stories that I welcome it anytime.
That's amazing. So let's start at the very, very beginning, if we could, not to date either one of us, but just so that anyone that's listening, because we have a pretty decent sized audience at this point, tell us a little bit about you growing up. I happen to know a little bit of this story because I've had the honor of meeting your mom. So tell me a little bit about growing up and more of a segue into what college you went to, what were you doing, and then how did that all morph into real estate? So when you were growing up, were you going to be an astronaut? Were you going to be a marine biologist? And then how did that morph into real estate?
Well, that's a great question. What I wanted to be when I was a kid. I love that question. Well, as for my childhood, it was very, as I can say the word peripatetic, which is just itinerant. Basically, I lived in so many different places, and that was thanks to my mom. And I actually say that truly as a thank you, because it was such an incredible experience. It was somewhat difficult at times because I was away from my dad, but I had the opportunity to see the world. I was born in New Hampshire, where my dad also was born and raised, but then moved when I was very young to Boston, and then on to Amsterdam, and then from there to Munich, and then from there to Paris, and then back when I started high school to Connecticut, where I went to boarding school. And to your question about college, I went from boarding school in Connecticut to Barnard College, which is in New York. It's the sister school. Columbia, yes. And it was an incredible experience. But I think all of that childhood experience really served me in my real estate career later on in many ways. Number one, speaking different languages, French and German, obviously English, and also just learning how to understand and be open to other people's differences and mindsets and cultures. I think it's been invaluable in that way because everybody, every buyer, every seller has a very certain mindset. We have our way of doing business, but I think it's so important to listen and hear what our buyers or our sellers are telling us. And I think just by becoming more in tune to, again, different ways of life, it really allowed me to listen more. After college, I had every intention of becoming a film producer. And I ended up going to grad school, which is where I met my husband in Syracuse, New York, and studied communications and film. And out of that, I got a job in Europe. I was kind of going from Paris to Munich to London, which is where we were based, and had the time of my life for 2 years. We were in the independent film business. So the company was European. And so we did a lot of French, British, German films. And then they decided they wanted to go into the American indie film business. So they moved me to LA. And I did not know LA from Adam. It scared the daylights out of me. And that's another, I think, invaluable thing that I ended up or do bring to real estate, which is just keeping an open mind to locations and surroundings. And I had a very long learning curve in LA. Just getting to know the city was no easy feat. It really wasn't. And I don't know if you can speak to that at all, Michael. I know you obviously moved here a number of years ago, and I'm sure it was a change. And I always intended to move back to New York. I was very used to cities there where you could walk, you could take the train, you could get from A to Z or A to B in a split second. And that changed dramatically moving to LA. And I did work in film for a number of years, actually quite a few years, probably 8 years, 10 years almost. And it was fun. We were very successful. We made a couple of great indie movies, including The Usual Suspects. But it's interesting because my mother, when I was growing up, to your question earlier about what did I want to do growing up, I always thought I would be a diplomat. It sounds so kind of highfalutin, but it's because I had such an international background that it kind of made sense. My mom ended up going into real estate first, residential, but then subsequently into commercial. And as I became an adult, she always said to me, my gosh, you'd make such a good real estate agent. And I thought, no, that's so not in my wheelhouse. Cut to, I got a little burned out in the independent film business, and I just decided I wanted more time with my husband and wanted to start a family. So I started working in relocation, which was an amazing experience with a company that's based here in LA, and that opened the door to a lot of opportunities, as well as just so many wonderful clients that I helped kind of find their place in LA, and many of them coming from all over the world. And then it just dawned on me, my mom was right. I should become a realtor. And that's what I ended up doing. And I never looked back. It's been 14 years now. That prior history was invaluable when it comes to, or when it came to then segueing into real estate. And it still is invaluable on so many levels.
That's amazing. And, a couple of things that you just said that really stuck out for me. Well, number one is diplomacy. So it's funny that you want to be a diplomat, because I think diplomacy is almost your middle name when it comes to real estate. And what most of us have to deal with, whether it's from a financing side or from the real estate transactional side, diplomacy is definitely an art or anything. It's the other thing that you mentioned was like, there's always a terminology of, do you speak LA, right? Like you just asked me before. So it's funny because I've said this to you before many times, and I credit you amongst my family. I credit you amongst my friends that I'm still learning. I should really say I have not learned. I am still learning to speak LA. And I remember many conversations where you were extremely patient with me and articulated for me, well, maybe perhaps we could, say it differently or do it differently. And not until this conversation that I just put two and two together, A, for the amount of love and kindness that you had to be patient with me. But now that I understand you had that East Coast background, so you understood me and understood the challenges I have. It reminds me of the funniest story for me, and it literally just happened in the reverse last week, where we came to LA, my wife and I, all the time because there was this wine and food festival for this winery out in Oxnard, California. So we would they would have this wine and food festival once a year at the winery. It's called Royal Wines, and they have their own chef, very high-end chef, and they do a pairing. And it's like you just said, fancy, right? It's a
Yeah.
fun event. And we would come once a year. My wife and I make it like our foodie trip, if you may.
Fun.
Shannon was our waitress, and we loved her to death. But every time she'd come to the table, we'd always snicker and laugh because she would always come and we'd have a good time, and then she'd walk away. And the busboy or the assistant waiter, wherever it was, would always come by and like, do you want water or whatever? And we would say, oh, we're good. And he would go, no worries. And we'd go,
Ah,
no worries. We're not worried. Don't really know why. Like, we actually found it very condescending. No worries.
yeah.
And it wasn't
Yeah.
until like months later, when maybe even a year later, I'm sitting in New York with a buddy of mine from LA, who we then met up with, and we're at a restaurant in New York. And someone in New York comes over and he says, would you like something? And he answers him, yes, no. And he goes, no problem. My friend turns to him and goes, no problem? Why would it be a problem? And that's when like the light bulb went off for me. I was like, so Californians, the West Coast say no worries. East Coasters say no problem. They all mean the same thing. But there are some of those interesting nuances that you have to learn within the different cultures. And to your point earlier, I think it's really boded well for you, all that upbringing from the different countries, the different languages that you speak, and the different cultures that you've been so open-minded to learn about really helps you. Because I could say we always go for like celebratory dinners after we close a deal, you and I together, and I meet many of your clients, and they are from almost every walk of life. There is no one particular type of client that Alexandra works with. You just like people. And that's kind of like a gift that you either had as a kid or I think as you're giving credit to your mother, right?
In part, yes, I think absolutely. It's just, and maybe it is something just innate, but I do think a lot of it comes from my mom. And, aside from understanding different cultures and sort of, people from different places, let's say even in the country, I think, and I still learn with every deal that whether it's a seller or a buyer, they just bring something different to the table. And sometimes it's with an open heart and mind. And sometimes it's with a lot of trepidation and mistrust. And I really work hard to try and break through that because as we all know, there's buying a home or selling a home for that matter is a very daunting task. I mean, for buyers, it's probably the biggest transaction of a lifetime. And so there's a lot of kind of fear and worry and concern that comes out. And I try to mitigate that to the extent that I can. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but I do the best that I can, just to help people understand. I mean, as an example, a lot of buyers, I offer them a home warranty. That's kind of my gift to every buyer. And so many of them either A, never take advantage of it, or B, just forget about it, or C, find that when they're in a situation when something breaks down, that they don't know quite how to navigate the home warranty map. And it means reading the fine print. And so with that, they come with a sense of like, well, they're just going to rip me off. And I am the first person to say, actually, no, if you really do it right and you follow the protocol, there are so many benefits to it. And 9 out of 10 times they kind of come around on that, but sometimes it's more challenging to get them to really understand certain values that come with buying a piece of real estate. And with that, like a home warranty is a great example.
So take me back to the beginning, if I could, because we don't want to date each other, put any sort of age limitation or anything on us. But walk me through. So you've been doing this for a while now, and you started in relocation, like you're saying. So a lot of the audience here, people like myself that are mortgage brokers, mortgage originators, right? So walk us through as a real estate agent. There has to be either a funny story or an incident that happened to you when you were first starting out, like a rookie mistake or something that you did early on in your career and then learned either the hard way or the funny way to really change things and have become like maybe an anchor in the way you sell real estate today. Anything that come to mind?
Gosh, you're testing my memory on just sort of the early career part. But I think, one example was just, I remember there was a buyer that I had met at an open house in Beverly Hills. And he said, I'd really like to buy a place in Beverly Hills. And I said, okay, but he wanted something off market. So I did a mass mailing and I was guided by my mentor at the time because I was on a team. She said, well, you should make sure potential sellers understand that this person that you're talking about, this buyer, is legit and real. So you should use their name. Well, that was a mistake because, of course, I did this massive mailer. And he then called me and said, all my friends in Beverly Hills are telling me that you're looking to buy a home. Did you send something out? And I said, well, yes, I did, as a matter of fact. And I clearly should have asked your permission. And he said, that's no big deal. I share all my information with people. I don't mind. But it occurred to me that, those are things that one has to be so mindful of. It's such proprietary information. And at the time I was, like you said, just such a rookie and I had no idea.
So you sent out a note saying, hi, I have a buyer, Michael Moose, that wants to buy
Yes.
in Beverly Hills. That is a
Yes.
phenomenal story. That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
Could only imagine his phone blowing up, being like, yo, dude, why don't you call me yourself? Like, why do you have
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And he was living in some other part of town. It's like, oh, you want to move to Beverly Hills? So yeah, the cat was out of the bag.
Yep, that was social media before social media, right?
100%. Yes.
So you
Well
get the word
said.
out to all your friends. So within your career, let's stick on real estate for a second. Within your career, so you start out doing some relocation stuff and then get into regular sales, buy side, sell side. You've probably been with a handful, maybe a few or a lot of different firms and stuff. When you're a real estate agent, the way you are, that's really good at what you do, and all your business comes self-sourced from your spheres of influence, from your past clients and stuff, what is it that you're looking for when it comes to support? Because people will say that, oh, well, I work for Coldwell and I work for Compass and I work for Element, but forget all the names for a second. I want the people listening to hear directly from someone as experienced as you. What support do you actually need on a daily basis? And where do you find that you get the most amount of support?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I will say I've only been at two firms, specifically Berkshire Hathaway, which was a wonderful experience. Again, I worked on a team and it was just a really foundational experience for me. And I took everything that I could, leases, starting with leases. I didn't really have a sphere at the time because, I certainly wouldn't ask any of my friends being sort of a new agent, oh gosh, use me, hire me. I wanted to go out there and kind of figure things out and learn and then work on my sphere. So I had a lot of first time, or I should say unrepresented lease people and, first time buyers on the very, very low end of the spectrum. And I embraced it and I learned a lot from it. And then I could kind of build into my sphere. But the support, I will say, and I loved working with Berkshire Hathaway, but the transition from Berkshire to Compass was a real game changer for me because I realized that there are certain firms that do offer more support. And what I really needed was support on the technical side of things and also on the marketing side of things. And that's where Compass was incredibly supportive and still remains. But and now it's very easy for me. I kind of know how to do things. So what I look for truly in this day, now that I'm a seasoned agent, when it comes to support, is getting answers from people like yourself, where it's like, what is the state of things? And where do we see the market going, let's say in the first quarter of 2026? And help me with this client who is asking me certain questions about, maybe a bridge loan, whatever it may be. And that support that I get from people like yourself, and I have, I would say, kind of a handful, I can probably count them all on one hand, as to those kind of just bat phone people where I can just immediately get answers that I don't necessarily out the gate have. And I rely on you as the expert lender, for example, to answer, or on, sort of the inspection side of things where I can call a general inspector that I've used for many years and ask him some really detailed questions that I can look up online, but you know what? It's best for me to hear it from somebody who really knows how a house works and has experience with that. So those are the people that I really truly depend on in a very, very big way. It's not so much on the administrative side or even on the marketing side. It's sort of the real core part of what we do is, helping people to either buy or sell their homes.
It's a great point that you make, and the episode and the podcast, as we know, is the most mindset. But I think that we touch upon this on all the podcasts that we do. There's a certain mindset that people have. What I hear you saying, and something I've experienced firsthand with you, is you do come in always with that mindset of I can learn. I am a seasoned veteran, but I am here to learn. If I am wrong in any way, or I can learn something from this, allow me to. And it's interesting because I have done dozens and dozens of transactions with you, and
Yes.
many agents that I deal with, unlike you, come in and think that they need to control everything. So, for example, I had someone earlier today, someone's trying to sell an $8 million home. The home is listed for 13 million, and he has a buyer that wants to buy it for 8 and put down like 1.5. So he wants to borrow like $6.5 million on 8 million for somebody that's selling for 13. And he keeps calling me going, okay, let's call the borrower together. And before we do, I want to just know what's going on with his assets and what's going on with his credit and what's going. And in my head, I'm going, why do you want to know any of this? This is
Yeah.
not, it's not your lane of
No.
expertise. The best thing you can do on a potential $400,000 to $500,000 commission is for you to be like, hey, Mr. Borrower, let's get on a phone and let's talk this out. What are your concerns? What are your wants? And this is more a compliment to you because we always do that with all of your clients. And I think it's something that really sets you apart from most other agents, how you never tried to lead with, you know everything. You actually lead the other way. And your mindset is more like, what do you need as my client? And let me connect you with whether it's a lender for financing, whether it's a home inspector. And we've had a couple of deals where like things went really funky with the home and home inspection.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to put on a cape. And I think other real estate agents that are listening to this should learn from someone as experienced as you. Attack a problem as a team. Let's discuss it. Let's figure it out together. There's no one person in this group that has the exact answer other than the one that focuses on it, whether that be home improvement by the home inspector, financing by the lender, the property. I love when borrowers call me and go, "Do you think I'm going to have an appraisal problem?" And I go, right away, it's a red flag to me. You did not talk to your agent. Why
That's
would I
right.
know if you're going to have an appraisal problem? If you think
Absolutely.
you might be overpaying for this home, have you discussed the comps or the value of the home with your real estate agent, right?
Yeah.
And I always put that back to the borrower to have that conversation with the agent because you'll have a different perspective. Well, we're in a certain school district or we're closer to this or that or the other thing, and let that
Right.
professional rely on that. So, is that something, I guess, that you learned from a mentor or someone in the business, or is that something that you just cultivated over time and experience of doing this?
That's a great question. I think I did learn a lot from my team leader in that regard, who was, a luxury, high end, or still is actually agent, and was always very just effective in how she approached things, doing her research on her own, and then also just being incredibly even keeled, I think is the word, in any situation. And I definitely did learn like from that. But I also think it is an inherent thing. My biggest mantra, and I have a new team member now, and I've been kind of guiding her throughout the process because she literally has just gotten her license in the last 3 months, is always be solution driven. That is my number one mantra. And sometimes I can't find that solution alone. It's going to require teamwork. And my team is not just me and somebody who like my new team member, it's you, it's my general inspector. And I will always defer to you. And that's why I think we work so well because you understand that I respect what you do. And if I do have an issue, I know I can raise it with you. And there's equally this sense of how can we fix this? How can we get to the finish line? And that to me is the greatest gift. And anybody that I work with, whether it's you on the lending side or the general inspector that I deal with and all my vendors, et cetera, it's like think from the client's perspective to whatever degree possible and try and find a solution for them. Don't come in with a sense of, I know better, you have to do it this way, and you're wrong, because that is just going to go south in no time. I think that's really it in a nutshell, truly.
So let's segue here to a work life balance if we could. Now, you and I definitely give 110% to our
Yeah,
families. You have an amazing daughter, Lily, your husband, Alex, who is, in my opinion, one of the greatest film guys because I love the movies that he's put out. Happen to be some of my favorites, but I'm a little jaded and he's just an unbelievable human being, as you know. And I love how it's always confusing Alexandra or Alex, and you're like, who you
yes,
actually talking to. That's always fun.
indeed.
But let's talk about work-life balance because you are extremely committed when you talk to clients. And there's been times where you and I have been on the phone at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And then there's
Yeah,
other times where throughout a transaction, I always commend you because of the amount of respect that you have for me and we have in our relationship. It's funny how we'll open escrow and many other agents, I'll hear from them 5 times a day in that first week. And with you, when we open escrow, I tend not to hear from you for at least a week because you're like, okay, well, Michael's doing what Michael I know will be doing, and you're busy with inspections and stuff like that. So having those
that's right.
kind of relationships are obviously so important. But how do you balance for anyone that's listening here? Because I've watched you with Lily, I've watched you with Alex. Like you do a really great job of work-life balance, and it's tough. As an agent, your Sundays are pretty booked up and sometimes weekends. What is your mantra or how do you balance that?
That's a really interesting one for me because I love what I do. So I think when you love what you do, then you're going to find some balance right there in and of itself. And you bring that home, right? When you have that sense of balance in your work life. But that being said, to your point, I mean, we all work really hard, and I tend to be a bit of a workaholic. So, there are moments where I have to really m- set some boundaries and say, okay, I'm dear buyer or seller, I am not going to be available at 10 o'clock at night or whatever it may be, unless there's a true situation that arises. But I would say 9 times out of 10, I do still take those calls and I make those calls at 9 or 10 o'clock at night because I know it's important. It's not just trivial stuff that we're dealing with, but and I've learned this, by the way, with my daughter in particular, that especially as a working parent, we both work, my husband and I, that it's not so much the amount of time that you spend together, although of course the more the better, but it is how you spend that time together. And that I think is really, really key. Make that time of value, even if it's just an hour where you're picking up your kid from school and driving them home and having an exchange as opposed to my phone's ringing, knowing that it's not terribly important. And I'm just going to say, sorry, Lily, I have to take this call. I will only take that call if it's absolutely necessary. So those sort of my outlook on life. And I will say that, we do spend a lot of time together at home to the extent that we can and have conversations. And I think that our number one rule is, for example, and this has historically always been the case, that we have meals together. I mean, we can't have lunch together, Lily's in school, but breakfast and dinner to the extent possible. It's not always possible, but dinner's more often than not, where everything is shut down. There's no TV, there's no phones. And this is what I respect so much about where you come from, Michael, where Fridays, for example, are so cherished, where you spend that Shabbat dinner together and nothing else will interfere with that. And we try to do that as much as possible. I just think again, it's not so much the amount of time, it's a dinner, it's a drive somewhere where you connect with your loved ones. And as for me personally, I have to say, I'm so grateful every day that we live in Southern California because 9 days out of, or most days out of the year, I can just walk out my door and go for a walk around my block because it's going to be sunny and at least 68 degrees. And I can take a break, even if it's just a half an hour, whatever it may be. And those moments do help.
Very, very true. It's so true, and it reminds me of a quick story that that involved us, which was I don't like to do open houses. You probably know that already. I don't do really open houses. I think there's, I think you might be the only agent that invites me, and I go to your open houses. And there's really only one reason, because the last one I think we went to, which was in a really cool property in a very unique up a hill and a backyard, a weird thing. So my wife turns to me and goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going. Alexandra has an open house." And she goes, "All right, I guess I'll see you in 40 minutes because it takes about 15 minutes to get there and 15 minutes back. So I'll probably see you within the hour." And I was like, "Yeah, probably. I'll just swing by, whatever." I came back probably like 3 hours later. She's like, "What happened?" I said, "Well, Alex and Lily were there." So it was great for me. I didn't have to sit there and sell myself or whatever. And it's a credit to you that they are not just a part of your daily life, but you're an amazing mom and a wife, that they are involved and genuinely supportive of what you do and are your biggest fans. So
Yeah.
that's a real testament to what you and Alex have built together. Question for you, which I like to ask all of our guests. Name a book that had the biggest influence on you. I sometimes go to How to Win Friends and Influence Others, although as we were joking before, which is a major psychological question here of the Bernstein Bears, right? The husband and wife.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, I think it was Stan and Jan. And those are like the names in my head, that wrote the Bernstein Bears, and how so much of our childhoods grew up on that and the genius behind that book. Not putting you on the spot for your favorite Bernstein Bear book, but was there another book that had an influence, whether in your life, your career, or something that you would recommend to other people?
Well, my favorite children's book was it Bread and Jam for Francis? I mean, it's such a classic and I still can read it and it puts a smile on my face. And I think that is, and my daughter also loved reading it. That was my childhood favorite. But I would say overall, and I might have to just speak from the heart on this because there's so many books that I love, but I think To Kill a Mockingbird is probably my favorite because it's just, I mean, having lived in so many different places around the world, and it reminds me again of what the true beauty is of this country, which is finding justice in life and in situations. And I just love it. I can read it over and over and over again. And it just always leaves that message of, always try to do the right thing in life. And I think the way it's written again and where it's coming from is so unique to this country, which I'm, such a proud citizen of this country, and flaws and issues aside, there's greatness there. And I think that book really reflects that.
Beautifully said. Let me ask you, if you were to retire tomorrow, win the lottery, not have to work, maybe you would still work because you enjoy it, but if you didn't have to, what would the goal be? What do the golden years look like for you and Alex?
That is such a wonderful question because honestly, it's something that we've been discussing at length. And the conversation always changes. I went, as I mentioned, I lived in Paris for a few years when my mother and my stepdad were there. Well, I was in boarding school in Germany at the time. So I didn't really fully have that immersed experience, but nevertheless, and I didn't really appreciate it. Honestly, it was like, where's the local Burger King? I would ask. And it was like, what's wrong with you? And then I went back 2 years ago and I just suddenly, it's really spoke to me. So Paris. So I'm trying to convince my husband that Paris would be a nice place to have as a kind of secondary home, I guess you could call it. But that would be wonderful. I don't know if that's possible. We'll see. There are other countries that I like to dream about and think about, whether it's Italy or even Mexico, frankly. There are a lot of wonderful places like Mexico City. But I think to answer your question, what's going to be important is that I would love to still continue to work for as long as possible, but at the same time, dial it back a little bit, tone it down a little bit, and be able to do other things and see more of the world. Because even though I've traveled so much, there's still more to see, and I just love, love, love to travel. Work would still be in real estate to some degree, but there's another part of me that would like to get another degree. I don't know in what. I mean, I don't know.
To continue to learn.
But I do have one last, I know we need to close out, but I do have one last funny story.
No rush.
Because I had two stories. I told you the first one, but the second one was when I had one of my very first listings and I was so nervous. I just wanted everything to be perfect. The staging was great. I myself cleaned, even though the house had been cleaned already, but I did another cleaning. And I just wanted everything to sparkle and shine. And I showed up for the first open, which was a broker's open on a Tuesday. And it was like early summer and I was wearing all white and I was so excited. It was a beautiful sunny day. And I go into the backyard, which was a really lovely backyard. And they had just put down fresh sod, the squares of grass. And I look and every square had been lifted and like turned, and it looked like somebody was trying to take the sod. And first of all, I was flabbergasted because it was just shortly before the beginning of the open house. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And then I thought, oh my gosh, there's a security issue. Somebody's trying to steal the sod. I very quickly, much as I could, put back each square in its place, trying to not get my white pants and white shoes dirty. And it was like a moment of just full on anxiety. And I managed to do it. And the open house went great. We ended up selling the house, by the way, but very quickly because it was a fabulous house. But I spoke to the sellers and I said, I'm a little concerned about security here. And they said, well, we have cameras, we can see what's going on. And so they checked their cameras to see what had happened that night before. And there were raccoons.
Wow. And you were able to do it while keeping your outfit clean, which is more impressive than anything, right? Thank you so much. And I appreciate, first of all, like I said, I could talk to you for hours, and we do. One of my very close friends who makes it extremely enjoyable to do what we do and call it a job. This is about, as I mentioned, this is the most mindset, which is my mindset of, how to feel valued in what we do so that our clients understand the value and the relationships that we work with and that we feel valued in what we're doing on a daily basis. So you're someone that I learn from. someone that I call a very close friend, sister from another mister, as we say. We're glad that you're able to join me today. So thank you, Alexandra.